Welcome back to another episode of the Alligator Live Truck Build featuring Operation Snowflake. We're hanging out today with Clint Cannon, the owner of ATS, and we're going to be talking about our fueling needs for this truck. But before we actually jump into the fuel side of things, you guys are able to supply both the air and the fuel for this truck. And from my understanding, you guys are still the only company that is giving an emission-compliant option to be able to compound this. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit about your guys' vortex kit.
So the vortex kit is a cast manifold that actually incorporates the mid-pipe and the downpipe of the turbocharger. So as the air comes out of the small turbocharger into the big one, it enters into kind of a Siamese manifold, which is a cast manifold.
Right.
And it maintains a lot of the heat inside of it, so the heat transfer kind of goes through the pipe, and then as the air comes out of the big turbocharger back into the after-treatment system, then it maintains more heat for the after-treatment system, which is very key to keeping the DPF cleaned. It basically actively cleans because there's a lot of heat into it, and that's what essentially cooks down the soot,
right,
the black smoke, if you will. So the vortex system is a complete emissions-on system that is designed to be pretty much bolt-on, pull out the fender, drop in the vortex, put on your turbo, add your AC line, your bigger coolant. As you know, the later model Rams, they run a much higher coolant pressure. Mm-hmm. So we've gotten rid of the plastic bottle and gone to a billet aluminum return system, which is just more robust, and it definitely ensures that you're not going to have any problematic issues with the cooling system down the road. Then of course, everything that's in the kit is complete bolt-on, no welded joints. So it's very factory-like. You know, castings are always nice because they are always consistent, right, and it bolts on and it works, and you get the high mileage out of it. So with that system, you know, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting the ease of install, you're getting the reliability and the performance you would expect from, you know, an $80,000 or $100,000 truck. Right. And you know, it makes the power. You know, they're upwards of 600 plus horsepower. You know, when the system's all put together, and that kind of leads us into the twin fueler. You know, which is a absolute necessity when it comes to building power on a late model truck and maintaining the reliability of your factory injector pump, and primarily maintaining rail pressure, mm-hmm, which rail pressure is the key to emissions and big power. You know, as you start to open the injectors, then the pump starts to fall short on delivery. Right. And of course, opening the injectors, you put a tune in it to get the power up. The injectors get bigger. The pump essentially needs to get bigger. So what we've done is we've designed an or a secondary system that adds a secondary CP3 pump that works in conjunction with your factory injector pump. So now you literally have two pumps running to maintain the pressure that the factory is commanding.
Splitting that load up a little bit, so it's not working near as hard.
Yeah. So essentially both pumps run at, you know, half the duty cycle that they typically would. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, the factory pump is really limited, and the factory obviously does this because they're not expecting these trucks to make much over factory horsepower, so they size the pump big enough what it needs to make that power. When we start increasing power, you know, adding a program, adding bigger injectors, you know, whatever it is, you open up the injectors more and the pump just falls short, like I say. So adding the secondary pump basically does the same thing for you that having two motors on a boat does instead of one motor. Right. I mean, if you've ever been in a really big boat, you know, with a single motor, you know, you're really running the heck out of them, and they just run short. Yeah. So you add two, and it's just like, it just gets out of the water, and they cruise, and they're very efficient, and that's really, you know, the meat and potatoes of the twin fueler, the twin CP3, is having the secondary pump, mm-hmm, that it feeds, you know, into a secondary line, so it feeds the back of the rail. So your factory pump feeds the front of the rail. The secondary pump feeds the back of the front of the rail, and they both balance.
Versus teeing off, like seems like a lot of the other kits do. They tee off right before actually hitting the rail. Right. And it's not really. I mean, it's still helping, but it's not.
It certainly helps, but it certainly isn't going to get you the volume, you know, that you want, because you ultimately do have to push everything through this little bitty hole, right, through that line. So if you have two pumps, you might as well have two lines.
Might as well, yeah. Feeding
that on both sides, and then it just fills the rail, and you know, it gives you that demand you want. And again, the real key here is atomization. So as you know, every year it's like the manufacturers go up in pressure.
Right.
You know, 26,000, 28,000, 32,000, 35,000. Yeah. So it keeps raising and raising and raising. And the reason for that is because that is ultimately really how you make power on a common rail, mm-hmm, is these injector pressures are running at such high pressure that you have a very limited time to inject that fuel as the piston's coming down. So, you inject that and it makes a finer mist, which means there's more oxygen molecules around the droplets, which means it burns quicker, and your timing happens more on spot, more on time when it should. So you explode that fuel, and that's obviously why common rails or newer trucks, the newer they get, the less smoke they make, and the more power they make.
That's exactly why those manufacturers are raising that pressure to atomize better, lower emissions.
Well, exactly. Of course, you add all that on, and this is an emissions on system, so we're going to add this pump to the truck, and we're going to add the turbo to the truck, so we're going to add more fuel, more air, and then we're going to add more fuel, and that's going to give us yield more power, and then of course the net efficiently. That's exactly right. And the net is we're going to have still a clean exhaust exiting the turbo, which means it goes into the after treatment system, which is the DPF, and the DPF filters it. Cleans it, and then, the urea does its job and then takes the NOx out, and then it comes out the tailpipe. Nice, clean, breathable quality of air for us, and we have lots of white smoke from the rear tires because we're making,
good,
600-700
clean, efficient horsepower. Yeah.
So
that's kind of the whole goal with this is making that 650 very efficient horsepower, emissions compliant. Obviously, it's kind of a big deal nowadays. Is making sure that the focus is be able to make clean, efficient horsepower, and doing it with all the emissions present on the truck. And between the Vortex kit and the Twin Fueler kit, it seems like a perfect package with your guys' controller as well. That's a huge factor when it comes into this.
That's a key element, and that's one of the elements that sometimes you can run these systems without a controller, and the computer actually has to split the load of the FCA, and the fuel controller solenoid basically requires amperage. Right, so it's kind of like speakers in your house. So if you keep adding speakers, then the quality is degraded.
Right,
so what we've done is we built this nice little plug-in module that plugs right into the computer, right into the pump, and this little amplifier essentially receives the signal from the computer. We create our own signal. We drive the FCA, or depending on what year model, they call it a few different things, but it basically is the fuel regulator.
Right.
And we can control the fuel regulator just as the computer would, but the computer doesn't really know it. He sends a signal, we duplicate it, we do our job, and you back up the throttle, and rail pressure is expected to drop, and we can drop that rail pressure as quickly as what the factory one did.
Right.
So it's very, very seamless, and it bolts on, works, and the nice thing is it works with anybody's programming.
Absolutely, and we're excited to get with Calibrated. They're going to be tuning this on site, along with, we have a couple of installers. We have Hunter Inman from Six Nasty Diesel Performance, and Matt Fraley from Widowmaker Diesel Performance. And they're going to install the Vortex kit and this Twin Fueler kit live at the Ultimate Callout Challenge here. We're, weeks away, coming up in May, so it's coming up close. So we're excited about that. We'll have you back at the show just so we can kind of explain more on the install side of things. This is a pretty simple kit to install to begin with. It comes with everything that is needed, so we're pretty excited to be able to do this in, I think, it's 2 hours or something like that?
Yeah, it's a 2.5 hour job,
so
start to finish. Everything is supplied. You have your nice little nuts and bolts here, so if we can't forget anything, it's a little bit of Loctite and all your special made fittings, so everything plugs right in.
You're not having to run down to the hardware store or anything like that. And
absolutely.
At the event, that's a big deal. I mean, when we're sitting in a booth and we're building this truck, we don't have time to run down to a Home Depot or something like that and pick up some fittings. So it's this perfect kit for this application. We're very excited. So if you guys have any questions about this kit, just hit us up. Beyond that, join us live at the Ultimate Callout Challenge coming up here in May, and stick with us for the next bit of this video series, and we'll see you next time.